Good evening, everyone. I'm Steve Willis. I'm one of the founders of Hope Sheds Light. It is a pleasure to see all of you here with us in the Holy Cross Lutheran Church. This is our family support group. And thank you all who are joining us on Facebook. We appreciate it very much. Hope Sheds Light is a nonprofit that is dedicated to raising awareness about the disease of addiction and providing resources and education to individuals and the entire family that help toward recovery. And our overall mission is to provide hope to the community. Okay. We started about 4 years ago, I guess. The other founders are Arvo Prima, your friend, and Ron Rosetto. We have lost our sons, the three of us, to this disease. And as much as we miss them, we learned a great deal about this disease. And the fact is that this disease affects not just the loved ones that we're so concerned about, but us as family members. Right? We all get affected. There's no question that I got as sick, perhaps even sicker than my son when we were going through this journey together. Early on, Arvo and Ron and I were telling our sons individually, you have to do certain things, do this and do that. It became clear to us that the sicker we got, we needed the same kind of help. We needed to take actions just like he did, just like they did, so that we could see what recovery feels like and looks like. We needed to be an example. Hope Sheds Light teaches that. This is about families. This is about helping you in any way that we can by giving you an educated plan that's based on love and wisdom to move forward. Okay? And this family support group is all about that. We meet the second and fourth Tuesday of every month here in the Holy Cross Lutheran Church. We love the fact that people are joining us in Facebook, but we really want you to join us here. I'll tell you why. We break up these meetings in two parts. The first part is really an educational piece where we invite really smart people in to talk and to share their own journey, to talk about treatment and recovery. And then the second part, we break out into groups, and that's why we need more and more and more of you here. That's the fun part, because we get to find out what's on your heart, see? And we get to explore what the speaker said and how those attitudes, those ideas, affect you. And again, the overall goal is to give you an educated plan that'll help you. And our great hope, by you sharing with us, showing up and being with us, that you change the way that you think and feel about this disease called addiction. And that by doing so, you get healthier. That's our prayer. Okay, so thank you again for joining us. Let me introduce Lindsay Quintez, our foundation director. She's going to introduce our speakers tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. He's a wonderful speaker.
Thank you.
Does an amazing job, delivers an amazing message. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, even though the weather is less than desirable. But rain brings rainbows, so that's a good thing. Just not at 7 o'clock at night. I want to welcome Joel. Joel is here, and Donna's going to be here shortly. Joel and Donna are a mother and son dynamic duo team. They presented for us last week, and they're going to do the second part of their series tonight. So why don't we welcome Joel?
Good evening, everybody.
Hello. Hi,
Hello, hello. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks for having me out. Thank you for the introduction. Very grateful for Hope Sheds Light. I met Steve. I know there's a bunch of faces behind Hope Sheds Light. I was with my mom a couple years ago, 2.5 years ago. We moved down to Ocean County from Middlesex County, and was helping her through a divorce and all this stuff, and I had been working in the field, and we saw it down the road from our house that we just moved into in Waretown. There was a little church, and there was some opiate event that was going on, and we went down there. We met Steve for the first time and got to hear him share his story, and I've just watched this organization, this community, do a lot of work, help a lot of people, and just continue to grow and help more people. So I'm just grateful to be asked to come out and share my experience and do my best to use my experience to help somebody else. And That's just what I try and do. So, my name is Joel Pomalis. I work as an advocacy organizer for the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence here in New Jersey. We focus on a few different things: legislative policy, community awareness, community engagement, try and make the landscape here in New Jersey a little bit more friendly to people trying to enter into treatment or seeking recovery, get some better prevention programs out in the community, stuff like that. I also am the founder of Mainstream Recovery. It's a consulting training organization that develops and implements recovery support programs for communities and organizations, stuff like that. So, most importantly, I'm a person in recovery. I'm a person in long-term recovery since July of 2011, a little bit over 6 years. Yes, love the claps. Yeah, it's really awesome. So I'm 32 years old. I came into recovery, I was about 26. And, my mom is here. We've done this a couple times. We did this a couple weeks ago here. We're going to, add on to that. And we've done this, once or twice before at some different meetings and stuff where we were asked to come out and just share, mother, son. I call it mommy and me. Mommy and me. And it's awesome to be able to do that, It was a tough road for a really long time. So I'm going to share a little bit of my story, and I'm going to do my best to share my experience with family and my siblings and parents and just, what it was like and how we got better and how we supported each other. I'm going to do my best to do that. But, all right, so I guess a little bit of my story. Originally from Ocean County. I was born down in Barnegat. I moved to Manahawkin. Well, that's what I remember. I don't remember before that, so it doesn't count. But, Barnegat, Manahawkin, then moved up to Middlesex County when I was about 5 or 6 years old, moved up to East Brunswick and lived there for a long time. I just moved to Monmouth County recently. But, so backstory, I guess, everything I share, this is just my personal story. There's a million different paths, and, I know people that come from good families, come from bad families, that wind up in addiction, and this is just my personal experience, something I went through, something that really helped me and might not help somebody that or that somebody's going through. This is just, my experience, and hopefully, you're able to take something from it. But I always say, I come from your typical, broken home type of situation where, I know it sounds bad, I always share with my mom, I always try and hold on, not make her look so bad or it sounds so bad. It gets, But, so, and I say that, my parents divorced when I was young. When I was real young, my parents fought. My maternal father was very mentally ill. He had severe manic depression and was bipolar and was medicated, and he was self-medicated on and off his meds. And my parents fought a lot when I was young, and he was, he was sick and he wasn't healthy, and it caused a lot of trouble in the house, and caused a lot of issues. So they separated when I was young, and my mom, a little while later, remarried to, how do we say, your typical construction worker, biker, a-hole kind of guy that didn't want kids. He just wanted to be with my mom. Unfortunately, I had 2 brothers. I'm a middle child, so I also have middle child syndrome. But it's a real thing. I swear, I don't care what anybody says. So I have an older brother and a younger brother. My older brother is actually my half-brother, and me and my younger brother. My younger brother is about 2 years younger than me. My older brother is about 3 years older than me. So a little while after my parents divorced, my mom remarried to my stepfather, and it was good for a couple years, but after a short period of time, it's, within a couple years we moved up to East Brunswick, and that's, it's the same type of thing. It was really tough in the house. We weren't abused or anything like that, but there's a lot of fighting. It was separated. Me and my brothers were always against my parents. My mom was always there for us. She always supported us if we ever needed anything. But it was just, it's really tough to describe. We didn't have a good relationship with my stepfather. He never tried to be a father to us. We spent a lot of time trying to impress a guy and be good enough for a guy that just didn't really want anything to do with us. He just, supported my mom, and my mom kind of learned that after a little while, but stayed with him for security. We're from this area. Nobody, our family doesn't have a lot of money. There was a lot of safety and concern for us, by her staying with him to make sure we had a roof over our heads and food on the table at a minimum, right? So it wasn't easy. So, I don't want to give my whole life story, but so I grew up with just a lot of negative feelings, a lot of stuff. Like we grew up we didn't have a lot of money, and I remember doing stuff like going to the food pantry with my father to get food, from the church. I remember getting free lunches at school, getting the tokens, going up to the office to get tokens and or the little cards to give to the lunch lady when you get your lunch. And I remember all my friends not having those, having money to buy food and snacks. And I remember I used to get caught stealing in school snacks because I didn't have any money, and then the people would give them back to me after they knew oh, I don't have any money, everybody else has snacks, Getting free yearbooks at school, going on free school trips, stuff like that. Not knowing about it when I was young, but starting to realize what was going on, and just that was my life growing up. So I dealt with a lot of those negative feelings, right? And I say that because the first time that I got high, I was 13 years old. I smoked weed with an older brother and a couple of my cousins. And I didn't know that I enjoyed the feeling of being high so much because I didn't really like the way that I felt normally, the stuff that was going on in my life. And, I also was uneducated of what addiction was. I didn't know about a substance use disorder. I never heard that addiction was a chronic illness. I didn't know it was a chronic disease. I didn't know that, when I took one hit off whatever we were smoking, that it affected me way differently than it affected the people that I was smoking with because of my chemical makeup and the way that I was wired, and I wasn't educated like that. Prevention programs I went through in school were DARE or Scared Straight or whatever it was, and I wasn't science-based, fact-based information. It was scare tactics or just whatever it was. So I never learned appropriately about addiction. And I guess real quick too, I was influenced by media and TV and movies and stuff. When I thought of an addict or somebody that lived with an addiction, I pictured somebody from an urban area. Certain demographic. They were homeless. They were panhandling at the train station. They were either smoking crack or shooting heroin because those are the drugs that people who are addicted use. And I just, I grew up in East Brunswick, an upper middle class, blue ribbon school system, and no drugs on my corner, no crime in my town, not like that, and it just wasn't a concern to me. I was misinformed, miseducated, and that's what a lot of my stuff was fueled from. So I started using at 13, and within a matter of a couple months, I was completely consumed, and I'll try and go through this pretty quick because I really want to touch on the recovery and the healing and the beautiful stuff that comes after all the pain. But it was quick for me. I started smoking weed at 13. Within a couple months, I was getting high almost every day, as much as I could get money together or find friends that were getting high too. By the time I turned 14, I had already moved on to other substances. I started taking ecstasy and doing Special K, for people who know what that is. And, I was young doing this stuff, young doing other drugs, and just completely consumed my life. I wasn't educated. I didn't know I had an illness. I didn't know I had a disease that was really causing me to react like this. And little by slowly, I moved on from one substance to the next, and I started using drugs I said I would never use. I started doing things I said I would never do. I started hurting people that I didn't want to hurt. Slowly watched my life just unravel and fall apart around me. Right? School didn't matter anymore. Football didn't matter anymore. Extracurricular activities, the relationships with my friends that I was close with, started to go by the wayside. If you didn't get high, I wasn't hanging out with you. I would say, Mom always tried to, you got to be home for dinner every day. Better get your butt in the chair for dinner. It would, never happen. I hated being home. I wanted to be out doing whatever I wanted to do. And I couldn't figure out why. Like I said, I didn't know I had an addiction. I had never heard about this illness or disease. I thought that I was just doing whatever I wanted to do. But, it was really confusing. You know what I mean? I didn't want to do what I was doing. I knew it was wrong. I knew drugs are illegal. I knew drugs could kill me. I knew better. My parents raised me better. It wasn't okay. None of my parents used drugs. My my brothers didn't really use the way that I did, and like I knew better, and I wanted to do better. I wanted to be like my friends that came from good families and like did good stuff and didn't make all these mistakes that I made, but I just wasn't able to. Like my compulsion or my obsession to use like drugs was way stronger than my desire to do other stuff that should have brought as much joy as the drugs did to my life, but I just wasn't able to. So it was very confusing to like want to do better. I don't want to do this because I know I'm going to get in trouble, and then not do it anyway, and then develop these long, over a period of time, develop like depression and low self-esteem and all these confusing feelings and emotions that like, I just thought I was just a messed up person, So I did that for a number of years, and I went through all these crazy things. I dropped out of school when I was young, 16 years old, and my parents asked me to leave the house, and, went through like another 10 years of addiction and just become somebody that like I just never thought that I would be. In my worst nightmares, I never thought that I, would go through all the stuff that I went through, right? Quick snapshot, I got arrested a lot of times, right? I definitely didn't look like this when I came into recovery, I can assure you. I didn't talk like this, I didn't smell like this, definitely didn't look like this. I had like 2 pairs of clothes, I had no hygiene, all this stuff. But, I got arrested a lot of times, right? Criminal justice is a big part of my story. I've been arrested 11 times, 3 times as a minor, 8 times as an adult. I have multiple felonies on my record. I've only been arrested for possession with the intent to distribute, or DUI. I've never been arrested for any violent crimes, no assault, no battery, no burglary, no breaking and entering, no theft, no stolen property, nothing like that. And I just share that because of, some of the stuff that's in place in our culture and society. I've only been arrested for drugs or, similar charges, and I have multiple felonies that I can never get off my record that'll follow me forever. And I can assure you I'm very far from a criminal. I just had an addiction. I had an illness that was treated as a criminal justice issue. And, it's a whole another conversation for another day. But, so, I went through all this different stuff and arrests and hospitalizations, right? Like 2 of the crazy stories I always share to not like dwell. Like I love to just talk about myself and tell my story, all this stuff, right? So I'll do my best with you guys. I share like 2 extreme stories about addiction to, if anybody's going through it, went through it, might be going through it, I don't know. But situations that people would normally go through, somebody that's not living with an addiction, would be able to take a step back and be like, oh, okay, like this crazy stuff has happened in my life. I should really reevaluate the decisions I'm making, maybe the people I'm hanging out with, and like change some stuff. But just, we're not able to do that, or I wasn't able to do that because my obsession and my desire to continue to live it the way that I was living was too strong in comparison to my desire to change or the work that it was going to take to change things in my life, right? So 18 years old, I was selling drugs, and somebody broke into my house. I was renting a house up in East Millstone in Somerset County, 18 years old. It was a Monday morning. I was just doing presentations in a school yesterday, telling this story like 6 times in a row at different periods in a health class yesterday. So, yeah, 18 years old. It was a Monday. That's why I said that, because I was telling the story yesterday. It was a Monday, just like today, and somebody came to my house, like kind of broke down my door and robbed me. He knew that I had drugs in my house. His girlfriend had just bought some weed for me a couple days before, and during the, I used to tell people I was a victim of a home invasion, like this real crazy trumped up story about that I was a drug dealer and somebody broke into my house to rob me. But, during the altercation, I got stabbed 7 times, right? Got stabbed in the neck, in the back, in the arm, the shoulder. I had a collapsed lung. I was in the hospital for about 5 or 6 days. And, crazy. I had 56 staples. I had like the tube in my lung to like reinflate my lung. I had a collapsed lung, punctured lung. And just like this crazy situation at 18 years old. And I had no idea like what I was doing with my life or how I got here or how to change or whatever. And like, laying in that hospital bed or within the few days after I came home, once, one of those situations where you're like, wow, I'm really making a mess of my life. I should probably change some stuff up. And it only lasted like, I definitely thought that, but it only lasted a few minutes until I was back with the people and back in the same place and just back into the motion of what I did before I got in that situation. And it was difficult. So I went through that, right? 21 years old, I got in a bad car accident. driving on the highway. It was in the middle of the night. I had been drinking a little bit. I got into a fight with my older brother. Before I came into recovery, I had really bad anger problems, really bad rage problems, like completely out of control rage. And, I haven't struggled with that for a long time. But, I was in my car driving on the highway like 100 miles an hour. I lost control of my car, got into a bad accident, flipped my car like 5 times, or 3 or 4 times on the Garden State Parkway. And, fortunately nobody else was injured in the accident. And, but like I was pretty badly injured, right? I had a fractured skull. I got a big scar on the side of my head. I had a blood clot on my brain. I had an epidural hematoma. And I was in the hospital for another 5 or 6 days, right? And fortunately, nobody was hurt in the accident. This is somebody asked me yesterday when I was telling this story, if anybody got hurt. And I said, nobody else got hurt in the accident, but like my mom did. So like when I crashed my car, for some reason I got out. I was like completely delirious. I had a head trauma. They found me on the side of the Garden State Parkway, far from my car. But when they found my car, there was nobody there. It was just crashed with a bunch of blood everywhere. So they called my mom because it was insured in her name. So my mom gets a call at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever time it is, like, hey, we have your car, your son's car, but there's like nobody here, and it's like totaled, flipped a bunch of times. And so like, my mom just gets that kind of call in the middle of the night, So like those are 2 like tough stories that I went through, and there's a million different stories, that I could tell that are just like terrible and nobody should have to go through, but it was just like commonplace. After I was all in, after a few years of using drugs, I was like all in. This is what my life is going to be. There's no way I can change. Like whatever, I don't care. Like it's very confusing. So like this was just comes with the territory type of attitude, So I went through all this different stuff, and I don't know. I mean, so I came into recovery. My last few years, I wound up going into to opiates. I always try and mention that. I started using prescription pain medication, and then I went to heroin. Even though growing up I was a kid that would never smoke weed, and I'd never do drugs, and then, I would never use any substance. And once I used one substance, it was real easy to move on to the next one. And then, after 10 years, I was using stuff I said I would never use. And then after a couple years, I moved on to heroin. Lost a lot of friends to heroin. I would never use it, and da-da-da-da-da. And then I was doing it anyway once I was getting sick because I didn't have any more pills. I didn't want to feel sick anymore, so I was willing to do whatever, so I didn't feel sick. And it's very tough. Those are like the times, like for a long period of time, promising yourself with everything in your soul and in your body that tomorrow you're not going to get high and tomorrow's going to be different and you're not going to do this anymore. And then you wake up the next day and to your best ability, your willpower, and you're a man, and you can do whatever you want. All that stuff goes right out the window. You're just not able to not use, without outside help. Eventually I got professional help and I was able to stop, but doing that for years. I mean, literally trying to stop every day for years, just not able to. I came into recovery. I always tell people I got the nudge from the judge. A lot of people say you have to come into recovery on your own. You have to hit rock bottom and all this crazy stuff. I did go to treatment on my own, but my probation officer kindly gave me an option of, listen, you can either go to prison for 5 years or you can go to treatment again, right? So like very easy decision to make in the moment. I went to treatment, right? So, I guess I'm trying to think, not like bringing in like a piece at all to this. So I went to treatment, right? I went to a 5-day detox program, and I did leave the state. I feel like at the place that I was in my life, in my recovery, it didn't matter where I went. I could have went to, like the crappiest detox in the crappiest town, or I could have went to the 5-star resort treatment facility that had the massages and the equine therapy, the horses or whatever. Like, didn't matter what type of treatment program I went to. I knew I was going to take advantage of it, and I knew I was going to stop getting high. That's just where I was at, and I was able to do that. So I went to a 5-day detox program, and I went to a 28-day treatment program. When I was in that treatment program, I learned for the first time that, like, I had an illness, just like any other chronic illness. That addiction is a chronic illness, it's a chronic disease, just like cancer, just like arthritis, just like asthma, just like COPD, just like diabetes, all chronic illnesses that may be preventable, that are treatable, there's medications for, and people recover from, just like any other illness. I never learned that in my life. For a long time, I just thought I was a bad person that made bad choices and just messed their life up and deserved everything I got and deserved to be arrested and all this stuff. It did a lot for my depression and self-esteem when I learned that I had a treatable illness that I could recover from. And
Can you just repeat that? Because I think that that's
yeah,
important.
yeah, absolutely.
Just really emphasize
It
that. It's very
really,
important.
really helped me a lot when I learned that I had a treatable illness that I could enter recovery from. Learned that it wasn't just about going to a 5-day detox and a 28-day program and coming home and I was fixed and everything's behind me and I could just forget about it. There was a process, right? Recovery is a process of change. And it can start with detox and treatment, but for me, it's a lifelong process. It's ongoing. I need to maintain my recovery, and to learn that, I wasn't a bad person. I didn't have a moral failing. My parents raised me right for the most part. I didn't come from the worst family. I didn't have like your model family, but it wasn't the worst. And I knew better, right? So it wasn't about a moral failing. It was really about having a chronic illness, having a disease that I could have treated appropriately, professionally, and enter into recovery, just like people enter recovery from, cancer or whatever it is. They do their best with the treatments available and the recovery supports available to keep their illness in remission and rebuild their lives. People that have other illnesses, they learn how to change their sleeping patterns and their exercise patterns and their eating patterns and all this stuff to make sure that their disease or whatever doesn't flare up. And I do the same thing. I make sure I don't put any drugs in my system and I don't hang out near crack houses or whatever it is, so I don't relapse, right? It's exactly, and we just have this long-standing stigma in society that, drugs are bad, and if you use drugs, you're a bad person, and drug addicts are criminals, and all this stuff, and it's just not right. We just have some very long-standing stigmatizing views in our country that allow us as a society, as a culture, to view it as that, and we're very slowly moving away from that. You see that here in Ocean County with these law enforcement programs where we're getting people into treatment rather than incarcerating them, so there's a lot behind it. We just have thought that way, the wrong way, for a really long time, and it's going to take a long time to move away from it, but we're moving in the right direction. But yeah, I had a disease that was treatable, that I could recover from. Very important. So I learned that, I went through the psychoeducation groups when I was in treatment, and it helped me a lot. I was fortunate, I left treatment, it wasn't in another state when I came home after the 28-day program. I wanted to stay where I was, but I wasn't allowed to. Probation officer said, absolutely not, we're going to come pick you up if you try and stay down there, so I came home. But I did move home. I moved back into my town. I moved back into East Brunswick. I moved into a recovery house in my town. Everybody's story is different. Some people have to move across the country. They're scared to come back home. I moved right back into my town where I got high for 15 years, and I was okay. I was able to maintain my recovery. It wasn't easy. My life was a mess, but, Mom was there. I had some support. Mom paid for my, entrance fee, my move-in fee to the recovery house that I moved into, scraped together some dollars to make that happen. And I can assure you, for me personally, I definitely would not be in recovery today if I didn't move into that recovery house. I was only there for about 7 or 8 weeks when I came home because I wasn't able to afford it. The job that I got, I didn't make enough money and I couldn't stay there. But when I moved into that recovery house, I got connected with about 7 other guys that helped me stay in recovery. They had been where I was, and they started taking me to different recovery support meetings in the community. One of them helped me get a job because I couldn't get a job anywhere I tried because my record was so bad. And they just supported me. They became my friends, and all the friends that I had before used drugs and were bad influences on me, so I was very fortunate to move into that house. And I say that because after I moved out, I did move back into my parents' house, and I had a family member that was across the hall from me that was getting high every day. He was still using pills, and he was still using heroin. It was right across from me, and I'm fortunate to have gotten a little bit connected during those first couple months home that I didn't use with him. And if I came home that first week or whatever it was, I'm sure that I wouldn't have got connected the way that I needed to, and I would have started getting high with him again. So I guess quick snapshot in recovery, right? Like the past 6 years that I've been in recovery, I've been just the most amazing part of my life, and I've been able to do such amazing things and get involved in the community and get back to my family and learn how to be a son and learn how to be a brother and learn how to be an uncle, to learn how to be a nephew, right? To learn how to be a grandson, learn how to be a fiance most recently. It's interesting. soon I'm going to learn how to be a dad. Right? It's interesting. It's a lot of fear there, right? Like, my dad died when I was young. He left when I was young. He died when I was 17. My stepdad was never a dad to me. All these mixed up feelings about, am I going to be able to be a dad, blah, blah, blah. You know, so it's not easy, you know, but I've learned how to, I guess, keep my composure and do the best that I can in situations, and I do pretty well. But, yeah, life's a lot different. It's a lot better. So, I'll do my best. I can talk forever. When I came home from treatment, I moved into that recovery house, right? I was in really bad shape. Like I said, I did not look anything like this. I literally had like 2 pairs of clothes, had cigarette burn holes in them. They were dirty. You know, I had a pair of sweatpants. I had a hoodie that had burn holes in it. My hair was a mess. I didn't really have good hygiene. Didn't really take care of myself that much. I couldn't take my eyes off the ground. I couldn't look at you. You know, I didn't really know how to talk. I hadn't read a book in like maybe 10 years or so. I was so far removed from society for such a long period of time, I couldn't talk to you about anything. Like, I only knew about drugs, like how to smoke or cook or whatever. Like, that's all I could talk about. I didn't know about, like, you know, I wasn't following the election. I wasn't talking about infrastructure. I didn't know about the economy. Like, I didn't know any of that stuff. I had no idea how to talk about it. I didn't know how to talk about anything but drugs. I didn't have any positive people in my life. You know, the last grade I had ever passed was 8th grade. You know, I failed 9th grade twice, and then I dropped out as soon as I could, so I never went through high school. You know, I never worked. I maybe had like 6 months of work experience in my entire life. You know, I pushed carts at the supermarket for a month or 2, and I pumped gas for a few months, like, and I was 26 years old, you know. So no education, no work experience, low self-esteem, depression. I didn't know how to sleep. So I came home from treatment, and I had to like figure out how to like eat and sleep like a normal person. I would like literally sit there and be like, okay, how do normal people eat, right? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 3 meals a day. Let me try that. Like, I literally remember telling myself this. I remember having to learn how to like sleep again. You know, I used to like have erratic eating and sleeping patterns, so I would go to sleep at 10 o'clock at night, and I would force myself to just lay there until I would fall asleep, because I knew that I could like train myself how to sleep in a normal pattern again. It just was going to take time. So I would lay there for like 3, 4, 5 hours at night, and I just did that like every day, and eventually I just learned how to sleep like a normal person. Just like basic normal living skills, just totally foreign. Had to relearn it. So I was able to get a job, and you know, I had my mom like supported me a lot. It was not easy, you know. It really wasn't easy, but you know, I like continuously trying to think of like what is it that like either my family did or like my brothers or like that really you know, helped me in this situation. And you know, once again, like everybody's story is going to be different. What something that might have helped me might not help somebody, you know, either you or somebody that you're trying to help. But you know, having support from my mom, like my mom has definitely taken me to a lot of recovery meetings when I first came home from treatment. I didn't have a ride. I had a couple DUIs. I didn't have a license. I always say I got like this really sweet 21-speed mountain bike. When I came home from treatment, I was riding around Middlesex County, going to meetings and getting around. But I did that, you know. I got really connected to my local recovery community. You know, I go to a 12-step fellowship that just absolutely saved my life and, you know, taught me how to live life like a normal person. You know, I'm very grateful for that process, and, you know, I'm still heavily involved in my recovery community and, you know, outside of that community as well. I do a lot of stuff in the addiction and recovery field. But I just knew that I didn't know how to live, and this is like, you can tell this to anybody, like, you know, look at the decisions you're making. Don't you want to change your life? These people are like doing good stuff. Why don't you hang out with them more? Like, it's very like simple to us, right? Like, it's common sense, but it's just not as easy for some people. It just doesn't go exactly how we would like it to. But for me, I knew that I didn't want to get high anymore. I did not want to go back to the life that I was living, and I knew that my best thinking, my best ideas, the ones that I wrote down on paper, and I'm like, oh, this is the best plan ever. This is going to be great. Like, never worked. I wound up in a hospital bed or in a jail cell or whatever it was, and so I just started to hang out with people. You know, some of the things I heard for such a long time, I started to actually listen to, right? Like, they say you are the company that you keep. You know, you're a combination of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, you know? And I started to take that into consideration. I look back, I'm like, man, I surrounded myself with a bunch of knuckleheads and jokers, and I was nothing but a knucklehead and a joker. Like, what's up with that? You know, a lot of the stuff was really corny for me. All this stuff, like I never grew up. I just always did the opposite of what I was told and what I knew I was supposed to do. So everything was like corny to me, like doing the right thing and getting a job and paying bills and going to see my probation officer and staying, clean and sober was all totally foreign to me. Like, was against what I knew, even though like I wanted to change my life and do the right thing. It was just not easy, just not what I knew in my life. So little by slowly, I started to do everything that I was supposed to do. The first part was just not getting high, getting rid of the people in my life that were getting high, and do my best to be a normal person and just like be grateful that I was alive and not dead. One of the first feelings that I had to get used to when I was in recovery was like feeling happy. I was so happy that I wasn't getting high anymore, and I remember having to like try and process the feeling of being happy, being so uncomfortable because I was happy and not having that feeling in such a long time. Something that nobody should like ever have to deal with. I talk about it a lot now, so it's like normal, but it's crazy. Like, have to process being happy again. So I got a job from somebody, and like in the recovery house that I was living in, I learned how to like have a normal job. I had to learn how to work a 9 to 5. I had to learn how to get my paycheck at the end of the week and put it into a bank account and pay bills and pay my fines and just be a responsible person. Be a productive member of society. And it was difficult. I had to learn that, but I was grateful. I was super grateful that I was not living the way that I was. So like I went through things with like a pretty good attitude for the most part. So I did all this stuff and paying my fines and paying my bills and just doing everything that I'm supposed to do to the best of my ability. And my life started to get better. The relationship with my family started to get better. I started to show up for Mom on Mother's Day and birthday and the family parties and the holiday parties and all this stuff. And I was very grateful for that. Me and my mom have always been close, but being in recovery has really helped that a lot. Our relationship is amazing today. And it wasn't always like that. It caused a lot of pain, caused a lot of wreckage, and very grateful that it is the way that it is today. And the same with my family. Like both my brothers lived with an addiction for a period of time. My younger brother, he really followed in my footsteps to the T. I always wonder if he's going to be watching this Facebook Live. He watched the last one. But, like I said, my younger brother's 2 years younger than me. He followed in my footsteps to the T. He didn't get arrested as many times as I did, but used a lot of the same substances, completely rebellious. We didn't go the direction that we could have in our lives with the resources that we had available to us. And next month he's celebrating 2 years in recovery. That was one of the hardest things that I dealt with in my recovery process. I always tell people, like, when I came around, I used to try to get my brother to come to meetings with me and like go to treatment or like do all this stuff. Like I learned how to like change my life, so like I want to give it to you too. And we used to do all the same stuff. Like, why don't you want to clean up too? Like we could change and whatever. And it just didn't go like that. It didn't go like that for a few years. And it was definitely easily to say like the hardest thing that I dealt with in my recovery was, being on the other side of that. Like, a few years earlier, having my mom come to check on me like in the middle of the night to make sure I didn't stop breathing, to make sure I didn't choke or overdose or anything like that. And then I used to do that for my brother. Sometimes I tell us I get all choked up and I cry and stuff. I think I did last time, but I'm not gonna this time. But literally, being on the other side, like, so happy that I'm not getting high and have to go check on my younger brother to make sure, duck over is like he's still breathing, see the blanket move to make sure he's breathing. And it was just crazy, it was crazy. But eventually, he got it, and, he went to treatment. He went to a long-term treatment program for a year. He went to a 1-year program and, changed his life. And he doesn't have recovery that looks anything like mine. He doesn't go to a 12-step community. He doesn't, do all the same stuff that I do. He doesn't have a sponsor or whatever. But he's really happy that he's not using drugs and alcohol anymore, and he lives a good life. He was in college. He holds a job. He has his own apartment with a friend of his up in Somerset. Like, it's like a pretty good life. We didn't have any of that stuff before. So, do you want to give me like a time limit? Does that matter? Just keep going. I don't know. Just throw something at me.
I say maybe like 5 more minutes, and then we can open up for questions.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Yeah. So I'll touch on a few things. Usually I go through like employment, school, and like community and family. So I touched on the employment stuff. I couldn't get a job when I came into recovery, but I started to get really involved in the community. You know, it was on my heart like a lot to start giving back to the community. I knew like everywhere I lived, everywhere I went, I took for a really long time, caused a lot of damage. And I just wanted to like give back. So I started volunteering at like the local food pantry down the road from my parents' house. I was able to like ride my bike down there. Started helping people. I started donating blood at the blood drive and just volunteering, right? So we talk about service a lot, being in recovery and just giving back. You know, I was able to like be useful, find some purpose for myself and able to help other people that were in a lesser situation than me, you know, no matter how messed up my stuff was. Being involved in the community, volunteering and stuff, I started to meet people. First, you know, I started to learn about different conversations. I was just doing regular volunteer stuff, and then I learned about like, you know, the municipal alliances and different county organizations that were talking about addiction, that were making decisions for people like myself and my friends, and a lot of them didn't have anybody like myself or my friends at the table making the decisions for people like us, you know. So I started showing up at these other meetings and getting involved, and I started to meet other people. You know, I started to volunteer with like, you know, different directors and CEOs and doctors and lawyers and all this stuff. And, you know, I was introduced to a lot of people in the community, and I always stress this to people, you know, not everybody is the same, but, you know, like by far, like personally, I've been able to do a lot of personal and professional development, and like my career and my life has gone the way it has because I volunteered so much and met a lot of the people in the community that I met, like that were able to offer me jobs that I didn't have the work experience for, I didn't have the degrees for, I didn't have the supervisor experience for, you know, and I'm very grateful for that. I always I'll try and tell a quick story. My first real job, like I was stuck in dead-end construction jobs for my first couple years in recovery. I couldn't get like a decent job anywhere. I got jobs from my friends, like give me a job, off the books, under the table, whatever. You know, the first job I got, I met this lady that was the director for an organization called YAP, the Youth Advocate Programs. It's a county-based, or it's a national organization. There's a chapter in every county. They provide programming for at-risk youth, disadvantaged youth, marginalized youth. And they had me become the supervisor for the electronic monitoring program, the Engelbert's program for the adolescents in Middlesex County. I was the only supervisor. I didn't have any supervisor experience. You know, she met me, she's like, oh yeah, I love you gotta come run this program, blah, blah, blah. You know, and like she saw that I was an asset. You know, she saw that I was a dedicated person that had, you know, principles in my life. And I remember having a meeting with the regional manager of the Northeast or whatever. He's like, we're taking a big risk on you. You can't let us down, all this stuff, because he saw my record. And so I used to work in the county courthouse, like every other day, with the prosecutor and public defender that were my prosecutor and public defender when I was living around. I used to sit in the courtroom and just laugh all the time. They didn't remember me. Now I work regularly with the prosecutor up in Middlesex County, a bunch of prosecutors all over the state. So like that was cool. You know, I've been able to get around my background. Now my whole life is based off of my story. You know, the terrible stuff that I never thought was going to help anybody and all this different stuff. You know, I went on, you know, from that job to work in the field for a couple years. I worked at a treatment facility, worked my way up, became a director. You know, resigned from that job earlier in the year. I started my own company this year. I'm a business owner this year. You know, so that stuff's possible. You know, never dreamed of owning a business. I was able to go back to school real quick. I'll keep it short on that. Like, you know, like I said, the last grade I ever passed was 8th grade. And I was able to go back to school. A lot of fear. I only failed before. You know, I learned that since I had an addiction is considered a disability for adults 18 plus, so you're eligible for money through the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. You can go to a program and get funding for school if you've completed the treatment program. So I was eligible for funding, and I was able to go to college. And I went to college and learned how to study and learned how to write a book report, and I learned what an internal citation was, and I learned algebra, because I never learned algebra before. And I was able to do good, right? I was able to get straight A's, get on the dean's list, get inducted into the Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society at the college. I was in the top 1% of the school. You know, I was pursuing a PhD in industrial organizational psychology, IO psychology. People don't even know what it is. I didn't even know what it is. You know, able to do that, just able to completely change like everything about me, right? So I was able to do good in my career, was able to excel in school, you know, It's very important for some people. And I was back to my family, you know, like I mentioned, being back to my family and getting my brother into recovery. So I healed from the treatment and recovery process. I got back to my family. My brother eventually came into recovery. I have an older brother that's in recovery. My mom is in her own recovery process. Now, like me and my mom, we do stuff like this in the community, you know, just involved. My mom started an advocacy group, Young People in Recovery, the Ocean County chapter. She works with her prosecutor and her police chief and all this stuff. So completely like full circle. And just the story, you know, like it's crazy. It's crazy. It was really bad for a long time. We never thought it was going to change. And I was able to find recovery, and through supporting each other and never turning our backs on each other and continuously being there. You know, it's still not always easy, and a lot of stuff is new, but you know, it's a lot better than it used to be. All right. I guess I'll end it there, and I guess, are you going to come up?
I actually have a question.
Okay, I guess we'll go into questions, and anything that you want to ask, feel free to ask. Go ahead.
We can start with the audience and then
Okay.
come back to me. It's okay.
Go ahead.
Do you have any faith-based help? Have you developed a relationship with Christ, or you go to a church, or do you have a minister that kind of helps you get through this?
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm not a religious guy. You know, I was raised very loosely Roman Catholic. I went to church a couple times, got kicked out of CCD, so that didn't last. But yeah, no, I'm a spiritual guy. I definitely, you know, I pray a lot. I don't practice any type of religion. You know, my belief system is a lot different than a lot of people's, you know, but I become spiritual.
I
And,
am familiar with some of this
Yeah.
and stuff, and it's not a bad way to go.
Yeah.
Just think about it.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Okay.
Congratulations on your success.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Your turning point, you said, was when you had a choice of going to jail or going into a recovery program that your probation officer recommended. When you went into that program, did you kind of like resist it in any way, shape, or form, or were you really open to wanting to make a change?
Yeah. So I was open. I was a little bit fearful, and you know, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was dead set on taking advantage of the opportunity and not going back to the way that I was living. And it's important to understand, like, I was trying to change. You know, like for maybe 10 out of the 13 years, it was a party. Even though my life was a mess, I was really doing like what I wanted to do. In the last few years, it was really an attempt to go the other way, like knowing that my life was completely consumed by drugs and I wanted to change, and I was trying to change, but I wasn't able to. And it's very confusing. Once again, I didn't know that I had an illness, so I wasn't like jumping into a hospital-based treatment program. That wasn't, you know, I knew that it helped people detox and rehab and stuff, but it was definitely, I had looked into rehabs a couple times. I had checked it out on the internet a little bit. I was like, oh, maybe I could go to a treatment program, but I didn't go on my own. And it definitely, you know, I could have said no, that I didn't want to go to treatment. I could have went to prison for 5 years, you know. But it was, I definitely wanted to change, and I knew, like, it could help me. So I did my best to just take advantage of it. Yeah, it's, you know, but it's not easy. Everybody's different.
And when did spirituality come into your, shall we say, overall rehabilitation process?
So going through, you know, the recovery process, like I said, I'm in a 12-step recovery process, and a big part of that is pushed as, you know, having a spiritual illness and a spiritual disease, and I get with that to a certain extent, you know, and I started to practice different things that other people in recovery did, and I got to like reap the benefits, becoming open-minded to just say, you know, once again, like all my ideas were like, you know, I could definitely leave them behind, and what other people are doing that's helping them move forward in life, I could try. And so I tried different things. Like I had, you know, went to church for a period of time and, you know, did different stuff. And I found like what works for me, like being spiritual and how to, you know, control my emotions and what helps me when I get mad. And I would say probably within my first year, you know, I came to a point of developing, you know, spiritual personality. People call me Spiritual Joel now. It's weird. It's interesting process. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. I can relate to your story a lot. I've been fighting addiction for 26 years, you know, on and off, I really needed to fight. I needed to let some personal stuff out, you know, that I was fighting, like going through foster care, you know, when I was younger, you know. But until I just totally, you know, committed myself into, you know, recovery, you know, it's just worry about me and not outside things and try to fix me, just try to fix me from the inside out, you know. And as of lately, it's been working. I'm not too much of a spiritual guy, too. I believe in a high power and I believe in God. But there's things, you know, way deeper than, you know, religion that's going to have to keep you clean, like a connection, you know, with people, getting a sponsor, you know, surrounding yourself with people that are really in recovery, because no situation is perfect. NA ain't perfect, AA ain't perfect. There's a lot of, you know, stuff that can even throw you off even when you're in recovery. But if you stay in your lane and do what you're supposed to do, this thing can really work. I've seen it done. I have done it before, and I'm in the process of doing it now. So I just again want to thank you for your story, and thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We have an online question.
Online question.
We have a Facebook question.
Awesome.
How long did you hide your addiction from your mom and family, and what age did you start?
I started at 13. You know, within the first few months, you know, from the first time I got high, it was only a few months after that I just, you know, wanted to get high nonstop, and I didn't know that I was addicted. But I hid it for a while. I mean, I went to my first treatment program when I was 15. So I started getting high at 13. I went to my first treatment program at 15, and my parents had caught me a couple times before that, so I only tried to hide it a couple times. And then, like, I didn't really try to hide it too much after that. You know, my parents never approved of me getting high. Like, my mom didn't want me getting high. My stepdad kind of knew, but he didn't really try to be, like, a authoritarian figure in our lives too much. So he would go to my mom, you better tell him to stop getting high, and then it would come to us. But, you know, and my mom, like, I was just completely uncontrollable, like, did whatever I wanted. Totally, it didn't matter. Like, she tried her best and did whatever she could to get me to stop or be there or teach me or whatever, and I just didn't really listen. So I didn't, like, I didn't, like, need to hide it that much. You know, she wasn't calling the cops on me. I wasn't getting arrested. It definitely was causing a lot of trouble in our relationship. And then, you know, only a year after I went to treatment, or even just, like, within 6 months after I went to treatment when I was 15, I left the house. You know, I left home when I was about 16, so I didn't have to hide it anymore after that. Yeah. So.
Any other questions? I have a question for Mom.
Can I invite you up
Yes. For your question.
Before we go into our small groups, I just would like to know what advice would you give a parent going through this situation?
Advice. I would say don't enable your kids. I definitely enabled my children. You know, I don't believe in, you know, having the whole arrest and going to jail. However, I do think they need to be held accountable. If Joel had been held accountable at any point, he might not have gotten as bad as he did. But I didn't hold him accountable. The lawyers didn't hold him accountable. Everything got lowered and lowered, and he just continued on his way. So I would say, you know, don't pay for everything. You know, don't hand the money. I used to hand my youngest money all the time. He would say, "Mom, can I have $5? Can I have $10? We're going to the movies." And I would hand it to him, and I would say, "You cannot promise me you are not going to use this for drugs." "Promise, Mom, I promise." And I did it all the time, you know, and it was crazy, you know, but I did it, and you can't do it, and you can't pay their bills. You just can't do it. As much as we want to help them and be there for them, it's just, you can't all the time. I'm not like a tough love. I would never put my kids out, even though my ex-husband did it for me. I wouldn't do it. After my divorce and I bought my own house, Joel and Shane, actually all my kids were living with me, and Shane was still using, and Joel would say, "Ma, you have to kick him out. You have to kick him out." I'm like, "Joel, I can't kick him out. I'm not going to kick him out." And I still wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't, but there has to be boundaries, and you can't pay their bills, and there's just, it's just, you just can't enable. It's really a fine line.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very, very much. Any more questions? Does anybody have any other questions? Okay, and I think that all the questions were answered online. Yes, they were. Okay. So I just want to thank you guys so much for coming and being a part of Hope Sheds Light. And I know that you dedicated yourselves not once, but twice, 2 nights in a row. And we are really greatly appreciative, and our community has learned so much from your experience. So we just want to give you another round of applause. And I just want to encourage anyone online to make sure you come to our meetings and you can see what happens after, because a lot of good stuff happens. So thank you.